Welcome back to another episode of the Life's Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Quinn Jackson of the show. It's just me today. My co host has informed me ahead of time that he will not be able to make today's episode due to military reasons, to which I can respect, and I will not hold him for it. Again, still haven't figured out the guest speaker situation, but it is what it is. Things happen, and we all have things we got to do. So, it's just me today. Again, if you are new to the channel, I'm your host, Quinn Jackson of the show. This is season 3, episode 3 of the show. So, without further ado, we're going to talk about the NFL, and I'm going to give you guys my top 3, no, my biggest winners and losers of this year's free agency. So, having said that, let's get into today's episode. And as always, the game never ends here at the Life's Playbook podcast. Let's talk about it. So, free agency. It's pretty much wrapped up at this point. It's pretty much over, I'd say, at this point. All the major trades, signings, cuts, releases, etc. have happened. Again, it is still the offseason, so there is still time for more big news, more big trades, more big cuts, signings, releases, retirements, etc. Which reminds me, I'll give you my thoughts on the Brandon Graham retirement after I talk about my biggest winners and losers. So, having said that, let's talk about who I think is the biggest winner in this year's NFL free agency. Well, and again, it is still the offseason, so there is still time for other big things to happen, and to which I'm excited for. I'm kind of surprised that Brandon Ayuk, he was on the trade talk, he was on the come up for being on the trade block, and he survived this offseason so far. Again, there's still time for other things to happen, but so far he's still with the Fenners. They're probably, they paid him so much money, it would be a waste of money at this point if they were to trade him or to cut him. So I'm thinking they're most likely going to hang on to him for a little while longer, especially since Deebo Samuels is gone. I expect a big bounce back season from Brandon Ayuk if he survives this entire offseason. Friendly reminder that the draft is coming up, by the way. The draft is in April, which is not that far off. Around this time, it's the draft is coming up. I am excited for that. There will be an episode on the draft reaction, so stay tuned for that. But anyways, I'm kind of surprised that Brandon Ayuk has survived so far in this offseason. I know there have been talks for a long time now that he might be on the horizons to getting traded, but I'm thinking they might stick with him, and I think he'll have a big bounce back season now that Deebo is out of the building. So just wanted to throw that out there. Now, let's get down to business. Who do I think had the most successful offseason, had the most successful free agency? It was the Bears. They brought in Ben Johnson. They brought in a ton of offensive line help. Is it the Broncos? They pretty much improved their defense from being top 3 to maybe having the best defense in the league. Is it the Chargers? Is it the Seahawks? Is it the Vikings? They brought in a lot of good offensive linemen, and they got rid of Sam Darnold. They've said to themselves that, you know what, we drafted this rookie J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan as the 10th pick in the draft. Why not try to roll with him and see if he can have a good season just like Sam Darnold? So, who could it be? Who do I think is this year's free agency winner? Well, I'm actually going to go with a sleeper pick here. And I'm thinking to myself, again, this is just my personal opinion, but in my opinion, the winner of this year's free agency is none other than the Denver Broncos. A little bit of a sleeper pick, but I'm going with the Denver Broncos. They upgraded their entire defense. They kept a lot of key pieces to the defense. Bo Nix is coming off of a phenomenal rookie season. I think he's only going to get better. I don't think he'll have a sophomore slump like C.J. Stroud. That is a team destined for success. Right now their defense looks like it could be a top 2 defense in the league right now, top 3, top 5. And right now offensively, if they could bring in one more receiver, I'm not going to lie to you, I think the Broncos could bring in one more receiver to help work that payload with Cortland Sutton. But I'm not going to lie to you right now. I think the Broncos right now, after the offseason that they've had, the free agencies that they've had so far, I think that they could be the favorites to win that division. Now I know the Chiefs still exist, and I know the Chiefs just made the Super Bowl and whatnot, and we love to count out the Chiefs, but you got to really look at it. The Chiefs lost Joe Tooney. He's an all-star Pro Bowl level offensive lineman, one of the most valuable offensive linemen in the league. He went to the Bears, and they haven't really replaced a lot of key pieces on their defense or their offense. So I know Patrick Mahomes is still there. Travis Kelce is looking to return, and that's all fine and dandy. And Andy Reid is Andy Reid. But if we really go about how we look at the AFC West, if we really go about how we look at the Broncos head to head with the Raiders, Chargers, and Chiefs, on paper, I think we can all objectively think that the Broncos have the best defense out of that division, hands down. They have the best defense out of that division, hands down. I'm saying it right now. Out of the AFC West, the Broncos have the best defense out of that division. Offensively, you could argue, again, if they bring in one more key weapon for Bo Nix to throw to, or maybe they bring in a key running back. I like some of the running backs in this year's draft. Maybe they look into drafting a running back, who knows. But I think they should draft another receiver to help out with that payload. But if they bring in another offensive piece, which I think they should do, I think the Broncos should go out there and get one more offensive piece. I think they could objectively have one of the best offenses in that division. I know I know Patrick Mahomes is still in that division. He still reigns. He's still the king of the AFC West. But I don't know. I don't know, man. After the free agency that the Broncos just had, I don't think it would be crazy to count out the Broncos as division champs in that as being division champs in that division. I mean, the Raiders, they still have a long ways to go. I understand they hired Pete Carroll and they signed Max Crosby a 4-year, $106 million extension, and they might be going and they signed for Sam Darnold. I understand all that stuff, but excuse me, Geno Smith. They signed for Geno Smith. The Raiders signed for Geno Smith. Excuse me, correcting myself. But I understand they did all those moves too. But the Raiders still have a long ways to go. Chargers, they didn't go after DK, which I thought was a little not smart. I thought they should have gone after DK, because when you look at that Chargers receiving room, it's pretty much chopped from head to toe. Besides Lad McConkey, and I do think Justin Herbert needs another weapon. He needs another outside threat. I think he also needs some more offensive linemen to help, Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt as well. So the Chargers, they didn't really do anything impressive, which I think is kind of going to backfire on them come the regular season. And defensively, they got rid of Joey Bosa. They haven't really replaced him. So I think the Chargers, they're kind of in a weird situation right now. I think they got to figure some things out about themselves. I think it's, again, this could, the way they went about this free agency for the Chargers, it could come back and backfire them in the season. Again, I understand that the off season is still alive. There's still time for all these other big major trades and whatnot, so the Chargers can still regroup and maybe go out there and get some more pieces in the draft, or maybe trade for somebody. But I'm just saying, with what I've seen right now in this free agency, and looking at the AFC West, with what I've seen now in this free agency and the moves that every single team, the Raiders, Chargers, Chiefs, and Broncos made, Broncos, they made the best moves. They made the best moves in that division. They have the best defense in that division, and the sky is the limits for the Broncos. I think I would not be surprised if they don't finish first, if not close second behind the Chiefs again in that division. But I'm just saying, I'm kind of disappointed in the Chargers. Raiders, they have a long ways to go. The Chiefs didn't really do anything major either, but they still have a lot of good veterans. I'm not too worried about how they will do. I'm not going to be one of those guys that annually counts out the Kansas City Chiefs just because they didn't really do anything special in the offseason. But the Broncos, they made the biggest leap in that division, and I think I would not be surprised if I see them come out number one, if not close second to the Chiefs. But Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in the Chargers. They didn't really do anything big. I thought they were for sure going to go after DK because they have the cap space to do so. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with the Chargers. We'll see what happens with the Chargers, and I think that'll be a very interesting division. I think Pete Carroll can rally the Raiders. I think if the Chargers do end up, doing something interesting in the draft, I think the Chargers could be an interesting team again, and I think the Chiefs will still be the same. But it'll be the AFC West has gotten a lot better. I will say that with the additions that they've made. I think the Broncos, they are my number one biggest winner in free agency. My second biggest winner would probably be the Bears. I mean, they brought in Ben Johnson to be the new head coach. Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. That was a very, very good hire. It was anticipated through the remainder of the Bears season last season in 2024, and we all kind of knew that this was going to happen. Caleb has been pushing for this man, and here he is. But that was a very good hire. I think he's going to elevate Caleb to enormous heights, heights that he should have reached, this year, this past season. But coaching and front office hasn't been a strong suit for the Chicago Bears. But they are moving in a step in the right direction. Obviously, they added a lot of offensive line help. Obviously, Joe Tooney leads the way there with you know him being the newest addition and whatnot, and they added some other good guards and tackles and whatnot. I would say the Bears are my second biggest winner of free agency. They did a lot to get Caleb Williams some protection because that offensive line in 2024 was atrocious. We can all agree. It may have been tied with the Texans, and I'll actually get to the Texans in a minute when I talk about my biggest free agency losers. But I'll get to the Texans in a minute. But the Bears, they are moving in the right direction in terms of front office, coaching, protecting Caleb Williams. I think they're only going to get better. The defense is only going to get better. I think they'll make picks in this year's draft to maybe help Caleb get some younger weapons, to maybe get a solid running back, maybe Ashton Genty, maybe Sampson out of Tennessee, maybe Omarion Hampton out of UNC. They do need a good running back. Maybe they'll do that in this draft. But I think the Bears would be my second biggest free agency winner. They made all the right moves that they should have made seasons prior. They did it now. I think this is going to be a much better, much more organized, much more pristine Bears team, and I think we might. I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears at least make the wild card because that is a tough division. I would not be surprised if the Bears make the wild card out of that division. So those are my two biggest free agency winners. Now you might be asking yourself, well, who do I think is the biggest free agency losers? Well, there's actually a lot of candidates out there. Obviously, the Chargers are one of them. Colts are another one. The Vikings, I wouldn't consider the Vikings because they still made a lot of great moves, but the Texans. But if you were to ask me who I think were my biggest free agency losers, it is no secret that in my opinion, again, this is my opinion based off of all of the moves that I've seen every team make this far in this free agency. The biggest free agency loser, in my opinion, is the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, they are the biggest free agency losers. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, they just brought in Sam Darnold off of on a huge contract. But and they brought in Cooper Kupp. That is cool. The reason I have them as my free agency loser, as one of my biggest free agency losers, is they essentially tore down everything that they had just for those two guys. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to make moves in the draft. I think, especially now with where they're at, they should make some moves in the draft. But they pretty much tore down everything that they had previously just to get those two guys. I'm not a huge fan of the Sam Darnold move. I understand he had one great season with the Vikings, but how much of that was Kevin O'Connell's coaching? How much of that was having an already good offensive line? How much of that success was Justin Jefferson in having Jordan Addison. I'm not really a huge fan of the Sam Darnold move. I understand it though. Geno Smith was vastly older than him, and they wanted somebody who was younger with experience who could come in and win them games now. And Sam Darnold can do all that stuff. He can win games now, and we have seen that he can play well under a good coach and a good organization and a good play style. He can play well. He can get your team to the playoffs. But I'm just not a fan of the move. I'm not a fan of the move. I am a fan of the Cooper Cup move. Don't get me wrong. I am a fan of the Cooper Cup move. Again, I think Cooper Cup still has a lot to offer. He's not washed just yet. I don't think Cooper Cup should be counted out. I am a fan of that move. But outside of that move, they haven't really done anything. I do know they signed DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys. He is a great veteran pickup to have defensively because the defensive line for the Seattle Seahawks does need some improvement, and they do need somebody that can get home and create pressures on the quarterback. But out of those two signings, the Seahawks pretty much tore down everything for two guys, Cooper Cup and Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold, you don't exactly know what he's going to look like this year. And I know that the coaching in Seattle with McDonald has been great. We saw what he did with the when he was the offensive coordinator with the Ravens. He looked great, and that's cool. I trust the coaching, and I trust that especially now, they should make moves in the draft to help Sam Darnold even more. But I'm not a fan of the Sam Darnold move, especially paying him that much money just for off of one season. Not a fan of that move at all. And I think they tore down a little too much. They tore down more than what needed to be necessary. Sure, DK was a huge hit on the cap space. Yes, Tyler Lockett was also a hit on the cap space, and he was a very older guy. Now when you look at that receiving room, all you have is Cooper Cup and JSN. And Cooper Cup, he is injury prone. I will admit, I am vouching for Cooper Cup, but he is injury prone, and he hasn't looked the same. But I just think they tore down too much than they needed to. I understand that the division in and of itself has gotten a lot weaker. I know the Niners, who I'm actually going to get to in a minute, I know the Niners have also tore down pretty much everything as well. I know that the Cardinals haven't really made anything big happen, and I know that the Rams have made big strides in the right direction. Big strides in the right direction. But I'm actually going to throw a curveball out there and say that the Seahawks are one of my biggest free agency losers. It's just too much they gave up, too much they tore down, and they're really I think they're really riding too much off of one good Sam Darnold season. And I think that giving him 55 mil guaranteed is just a little much off of having one good season. But maybe if they make some moves in the draft, I think maybe they'll prove me wrong, and I hope they prove me wrong. But they better do something. They better get more weapons now, and they better get some more offensive line help now too. But that's one of my losers. There are a lot more other losers in my opinion, but let's talk about the 49ers because I did say I was going to talk about them next, and then we'll go to the Texans. But let's talk about the 49ers. They are also, in my opinion, a huge free agency loser. They just like the Seahawks, they tore everything down, but all the way down. The Seahawks tore it down to about halfway. Like the Seahawks can still do something. They can still make some moves to keep the team afloat. The Niners, they took it from Super Bowl championship caliber all the way down to rebuild in a matter of 2 to 3 seasons. Now, we've all seen the 49ers have great coaching, great front office. I'm sure, I am certain they can bounce back from what they just did. No doubts that they won't be able to do that. However, because they tore everything down and because they didn't really do anything with the free agents that were out there, they didn't really make any prime moves that could really elevate the team again. They are one of the biggest free agency losers. And I know this is going to ruffle some feathers with the 49ers fans, but you got to admit it. You guys pretty much tore down your championship caliber rosters. I understand a lot of them were injury prone, CMC injury prone, a lot of the defense injury prone, Trent Williams injury prone. The offensive line has fallen into deep shambles. And again, I think the 49ers I have no doubt in my mind that the 49ers can't make moves in the draft and post draft to be able to fix what they've done. But because they did what they did, I think they are another big free agency loser. They tore down the entire defense, didn't really get anything in return for the guys that they lost. They didn't really find good replacements for the guys that they lost. And it will be interesting. I don't think they're going to be worse than the Seahawks. Oddly enough, I don't think they will be worse than the Seahawks. I think CMC is due for a bounce back season. I think he's going to get the burners on once his injuries are straightened out. I don't think they're going to be any worse than the Seahawks. In fact, I actually think the 49ers and the Seahawks might finish around the same. But it is no secret that the Niners are also a free agency loser. And with that being said, that brings me to my third and final team, who I think was this year's biggest free agency loser. The Houston Texans got rid of Laramie Tunsil. They might be on the verge of getting rid of Tank Dell or Stephon Diggs with the addition of Christian Kirk. Don't know yet. They're going to have to work something out between Nico, Diggs, Tank Dell, and Christian Kirk. But somebody's eventually going to walk. They got rid of their best lineman. I already said that. They pretty much they did sign Derek Stingley to an extension to $90 million. That was a great move. He was one of the best corners in the league, and he was one of the best corners on the team. That was a great move. He's a Pro Bowl caliber dude. Great move. I will give him that. But outside of that move, they didn't really do anything else. They really need, because just like the Bears' offensive line last season, they really need to focus on offensive line help this offseason. They really need to do that. If the Texans do not trade for some sort of offensive line help or draft some sort of offensive line help, CJ Stroud is going to have another bad season. I'm telling you that right now. CJ Stroud is going to have another bad season. Now, again, they did sign their best corner to a $90 million extension, and they did bring in Christian Kirk, who I think is a very underrated receiver in this league. I think he can still provide a lot. But outside of those two moves, they haven't really done anything that's really impressed me. Now, again, these are all my opinions. And if you're a fan of any of the teams that I just named, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on any other moves that I may have missed that your team has brought in. Let me know in the comments below. But from what I've seen so far from the teams that I've just named, they haven't really done anything impressive to really bolster the team from where they were last season. And they haven't really They've pretty much regressed. Now the 49ers, this is kind of a planned regress. They kind of planned for a rebuild. So they're a little different. But the Texans, and I understand that the division that they're in is fairly easy. The Colts are trash, the Jags are trash, and the Titans are trash. But you also got to understand that those other teams are also in prime position via the draft to improve. I think some of those teams will vastly improve. I think the Titans and the Jaguars will probably be the two teams that improve the most out of that division. It'll be interesting to see what those two teams draft and what those two teams do. But I'm just saying, Texans fans, I know you guys are in a relatively easy division. But I'm just saying you can't get comfortable with having a below average, and I mean below average offensive line. And I understand Laramie Tunsil was a huge hit on the cap space, and that's why they got rid of him and whatnot. But now you're in, he was really the only, and he had a lot of penalty troubles too. But now you're really in shambles with your offensive line. And if CJ Stroud comes back with that, if that same offensive line comes back to the 2025 season, CJ Stroud's not going to look the same. He's not. Honestly, as an Ohio State fan, I would hate to see that because he had such a successful rookie season. He had a slump this season, And now he might have another slump if they don't do something in the draft or make some more moves in the offseason to help that offensive line. I'm not worried about the defense. I did see that they extended Danielle Hunter, so that is another good move that they did. But I can't stress enough. My big point of emphasis for the Texans is get offensive line help. They got to do it, otherwise, one, they will stay in my opinion, as being one of the worst losers in this free agency, and two, CJ Stroud's not going to get any better. Understand, offensively, they have the pieces. I'm not worried offensively anywhere else. Anywhere else, I'm not worried. They have a great running back, great receiving core, and they brought in another great receiver. Defensively, I'm not worried over there. They signed the guys that they needed to bring back. It's that offensive line. That offensive line is going to dictate how well CJ Stroud looks, and it's going to dictate how well the team overall looks. But there you have it. My three biggest NFL losers and my two biggest NFL winners of this free agency. Winners, Seahawks and Texans, are my three biggest losers of this free agency. And the Bears and I'm blacking out here. But Bears and the Broncos, Bears and Broncos are my two biggest free agency winners. So, having said that, again, and this is all my opinion is as different as the next guy. Again, if you're a fan of any of the teams that I called losers of this free agency, let me know in the comments if there are any other moves that I may have missed that your team may have done. Or if you think otherwise, let me know what you think, if I'm right or not. But that is my biggest free agency winners and losers. Again, if you're a fan of the loser team, let me know in the comments below what you think about the team. If you think I'm wrong or not, if I missed any moves. There are honorable mentions to other big winners, like the Vikings. I know they brought in a lot of offensive line help, and they ditched Sam Darnold, which I think was a good move. I think it's smart to rock with the rookie that you drafted 10th overall. I think the Vikings, the Rams obviously are one of them. Re-signing Matt Stafford and getting rid of Cooper Kupp to open up some space for Devontae Adams was a great move. There are other honorable mention winners and losers. But those were the five real teams, in my opinion, that I thought were worth mentioning. That I thought, you know what, these guys, those three teams that I named, they are the biggest losers, and those two teams that I named are the biggest winners. But with that being said, if you are just now new to the show, my co-host has again informed me that he will not be able to make today's episode due to military reasons. So I'm not going to trip over that. Still don't know what's going on with the guest speaker situation. It's very unfortunate. We were looking forward to having them on the show. Hopefully we can still work something out if the guest speaker wants to be on the show or not. But if not, very, very unfortunate. We at the Life's Playbook podcast were very excited that she showed interest in the show. But with that being said, I will catch you guys for season 3, episode 4 of the Life's Playbook podcast. Till then, peace out.